I'm very honored to be able to introduce my brother. My brother, Father Anthony Sirianni, is the pastor of St. Helena's in Edison, but he began his priestly ministry as a hospital chaplain, as a newly ordained. And his work in hospital chaplaincy led him to receive his doctorate in ministry in death and dying, and working with children who either had to accept their own mortality or the death of a parent. My brother has a huge reservoir of compassion and mercy. I usually refer to him as the good Father Sirianni. Because, well, first of all, he is younger, so please do not ask a question, who is the oldest? Okay, I am definitely the oldest. But also, his compassion has allowed him to be very strong in the face of a lot of suffering. I remember going up to visit him and when he was at Robert Wood Johnson Medical Center in New Brunswick. And it was in the fall. I had gone to visit one of the priests who helped us out at Holy Angels when I was pastor there. And we had a terrible bus accident in our diocese just maybe a week or so before. And that little boy was in the children's intensive care at Robert Wood Johnson. And so Anthony said, you know, he's one of your parishioners from your diocese. Do you want to visit? I said, yes. And I went in, and the most cutest little child with these big brown eyes is sitting in this big bed. And, you know, automatically my eyes started tearing up. And I looked over at my brother, and I could see the beginning of tears, and then all of a sudden, they just went down. And he looked at me, he said, I can't. I have to be strong for the family. And I've always respected that. Now, to answer any questions about why we are in two different dioceses,
you'll see after the talk.
It was decided that one diocese couldn't handle both of us. And both bishops have concurred. It is with pleasure that I introduce my brother, Father Anthony Sirianni.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm probably my brother Msgr's biggest fan because I just look up to him. He is such an awesome pastor, director of liturgy and worship for the diocese. And when I was first ordained, when I had to write homilies, I used to call him up. And I say, Sam, what are you preaching on this weekend? And they'll start telling me, and I go, could you slow down? And I was actually taking notes. You know, when I was invited to come today, I apologize I have no slides, but I'm a parish priest with a school, and it's kind of crazy for me to put things together because I'm more of a storyteller. If I was to write a book, my book would be, come have a cup of tea with me and tell me your journey, tell me your story. Every time when I was at Robert Wood and I would address the medical students that were coming in for the first year, they get their little white coats, and they will be starting, and the residents would get the longer coats as they were starting their residency for pediatrics. I would always say, if any of you really feel like changing, please, and this is going back in the 90s, please go to geriatric because we need you. And we need you because a lot of the health issues we're facing today is because doctors do not know how to care for our seniors. They don't want to care for our seniors. And it's not that they don't want to. It takes a lot of time and energy because we're living longer. And that's why when working with children and then working with adults and seniors and working with all ages, we're all children of God. And that is the most important part of our journey in life. Our journey in life is that we're going to be one with Jesus Christ. And we're going to be one with our Heavenly Father. And it's something because a dear friend of Msgr and mine, Sister Claire passed away, and I went up to the Mother House to celebrate her funeral. And Mother Ashenda, the provincial, said, we're all around her bed, and you know what kind of sense of humor Sister Claire had? And I was like, yeah. So she said, we're all saying the rosary, the family's there and everything. And I kept saying, Claire, I'm here, Claire, I'm here. And their last words, because they record everything, the good sisters, her last words were, I got it. Sometimes we just have to say, I got it. End of life, when it comes to a child, is so different. When I worked with adolescents, I would go meet with them, and they would say, help me tell my parents I can't do this anymore. I want to stop. Before medication came out for HIV and full-blown AIDS, especially for children and adolescents, we used to call them the children of the hospital. And they would become our children. And they sent me into a young girl's room, and I said to her, I go, Desiree, we need to speak about death and heaven. And she looked at me, she goes, this is serious, isn't it? And I go, yes, it is. And she goes, I ain't going. Now, when you talk to someone about heaven, right away, we put our own feelings in front of it. When you go to heaven, you're going to see your loved ones. You're going to see this one, you're going to see that one. But of course, automatically you want to say to Desiree, you're going to see your parents. She goes, I'm afraid of my parents. I never met my father. My mother gave me this horrible AIDS. She goes, you look at my brothers and sisters, none of us look alike. We have different daddies. And when I was a little girl, they used to bring me on the corner to the bar, and they would look at the drunk and say, that was my daddy. And we had a conversation on how when she meets her mother, sometimes AIDS affects the brain and the mind, that she will totally change. And we call that mental illness, and she'll be healed of that. She'll be made whole. And she goes, well, what about my dad? And I go, when you meet your mother, you ask your mother to bring you to your Heavenly Father. I go, but who do you want to bring you over? And she says, my mammy. She raised me. I go, then she will be by your bedside. Sounds good, doesn't it? Until she said, prove it. To prove it, we have our scriptures. And our scriptures say, in my Father's house, many dwelling places. I look at the dwelling place as a huge mansion, a huge home. And it also says, Jesus said, let the children come to me. Do not hinder them. The kingdom of God is theirs. And how important that is. And then she started singing, Jesus loves me, so do you. And of course, I didn't know that song or one of these, she was Baptist. And the aide came in, they used to call them aides in those days, now they're CTAs or whatever they call them, came in and was combing her hair, and they were singing it together. And then she looked at me and she says, you sure you're a pastor? Because you don't know that song. If it could be easy as a child for an adult. I was with an adult that was on hospice. And she said to me, Father, I'm afraid to die. And I shared this story about my little angel, Desiree. And then we talked about what her fears were and her anxiety was. And a lot of times when it comes to death, the fears is that we don't feel as that we're worthy. And if that's the case, none of us are worthy. But in the eyes of Jesus Christ, and the eyes of our God, and the beautiful sacraments that we have, we are made in his image. And the image of God allows us to be able to be embraced in such a way that we will never feel that being alone again. And after a conversation, and most of the time, and those who are in the health profession, especially in dealing with Catholics, their children are so far away from the church. So we have a double whammy to do. We got to kind of bring them back in a way of being that compassionate person and a compassionate priest and a compassionate lay person who does ministry. Because that is the way we're going to bring people back. That's the beauty of Pope Francis. That is what is so important, is to be able to bring that faith at a time when people feel as though their faith is lost. And also to use the pain medication in such a beautiful way that just 2 weeks ago, one of my dearest parishioners was on hospice and was at the Hospice of Hope. And the husband says, she has such pain, they want to uplift her pain. And I go, right, uplift the pain medicine. I said, but her children are flying in from Arizona and from California. When they come, they will lower it. And she was able to have that conversation with them. She was able to have that interaction that was so important. She was able to have bringing that finality and that oneness, and how important it is. Just Monday, I flew in from Florida. I took a couple of days off, and what my youth director, one of my teacher aides' mom, who was very involved with the parish, was dying, and I went over there. And as I anointed her, I just started to cry because I kept looking at the children. She was only 64. And the next day, she passed. And Michael, the youth director, I did his wedding. I baptized his kids. He came in, and I invited him up for coffee. And he looked at me, and he goes, Father, you really got upset. I go, yeah, it's a new thing that happens when you're 50, I'm 55 and over, and I call it's male menopause. We cry for no reason at all. And he looked at me, he goes, really? And I says, no. I said, what it is that I become such part of your family and the families of my parish that they see my tears. What was the beautiful scripture this morning at Mass for those who went to Mass? Jesus wept over Jerusalem. Jesus wept at the tomb of Lazarus. But at the same time, I'm that vessel to bring you over and bring you closer to God and to Jesus Christ. One of the things that was asked about, hospice being that does the Catholic Church support it? Absolutely it does. Palliative care. Palliative care, I was on the first palliative care program at Robert Wood University Hospital, the Children's Hospital. Palliative care came into effect because we were realizing that our children and adolescents, and now it's for adults, do not need to stay in the hospital. They can get the treatment at home. But they need that special care. And the palliative care gives that quality of life and that special care that they can have at home so they do not need to be in the hospital. Can palliative care turn into hospice care? Most of the time it does. Sometimes it doesn't, but most of the time it does. But it's a much more holistic approach, and how important that holistic approach is in caring for those who are dying. One question is that does a mature person, an adolescent or a child, which one would need the most pain medication at the time that I was on hospice for pain management? Who do you think would take the most medicine? The adult, the adolescent, or the child? Okay, it depends on the person. Children and adolescents, their metabolism works so much faster than in adults. So children and adolescents take more pain medicine. So it's so important that was another thing that back, with hospice and why a lot of hospitals, children's hospitals, have palliative care, that they have their own nurses come out and do the pain management and nurse physicians because they need the medicine. The reason why I share that is you hear someone saying, oh, no wonder that person died. They over-medicated that person. There's no way we can over-medicate that person today. In the 90s, there was a way we could over-medicate that person. Today, they have strict guidelines, and they have the pumps now that after a while it stops. That's what's important. That is what's important about end-of-life care, is that we need to be able to have that respect and that love to be able to allow the person to be totally out of pain, not to be snowed over, but to be able to be aware of where they're at and how important that is. And that is something that is so crucial. In the early 90s, there was a book written, and it was a couple of books that were written. One was The Forgotten Loss, and there was a study by a woman psychologist, who studied women that were 40 years old and over with severe mental illnesses. What they found was that their mental illnesses stemmed to a loss when they were a child that was never addressed. When you talk to someone who is near the end of death, what are they bringing up? They're bringing up their past. They're bringing up things that happened in the past. The beautiful gift of being able to go with the healing message of Jesus and of the church is that we bring that message of healing. We bring that message of acceptance. And we bring that message that they're able to let go of that. When I started hospice work, I remember going to a family with this long driveway. It was 25 years ago. And he needed to go to confession. The confession was so horrific that I went that night to my own confessor. Because as a young priest, I heard things that I never thought I would ever hear in my life. Do you know I was not off that property, and my pager went off? There were no cell phones. The pager went off, and that person passed away. They were at peace. The beauty of the Sacrament reconciliation, the fear today that our people have of allowing a priest coming in, of allowing a lay minister coming in, or a permanent deacon. It is just so sad that they think that when they see a priest, they see weakness. And they see how important it is for them to be able to bridge that over. When I was at Robert Wood, we had one of our adult patients come in, and their adolescent child was running out the door, and the woman in the bed said, "Father, stop her." So I go running through the hospital, and she goes, "Stop chasing me, you're a priest." I go, "No, I'm not." And she stopped, and everyone stopped. She goes, "But why are you dressed like that?" "Because I just dress this way. I had to put something on, so I put this on." I said, "But now I'm talking to you as a person. Don't run away." And we were able to have that conversation. You know, God gave me the gift of wit. I don't suggest everyone uses it, but each of us has those gifts. And if there's a way we could break those barriers, that is what is just so, so important. One of the things last night, we had a second grader from the town over Metuchen. She died of cancer. She was on hospice. I met with the families from the second grade and some of the parents that I met with. And we were talking about it. And you know, I know we have a wonderful church. I wouldn't be working for it. I wouldn't be here. And I know we have wonderful saints. But I had this conversation with my own bishop, Bishop Paul. Let's stick to the gospel. Let's stick to the scriptures. I told the parents, as I tell you today, I am the most selfish priest you ever want to meet. I pray everyone lives healthy lives. They live to their about. Our grandmother, Sirianni, she lived to be 94. She was a tough bird, but she had her wits about her right to the end. I pray for that. That's my selfish miracle. My ultimate miracle is that God calls us home and brings us home. God doesn't cause illness. The book by Rabbi Kushner on When Bad Things Happen to Good People, that's a good book. A book that he got that from, which is even older than that book, is The Bereaved Parent. Did anyone ever read that? Because that's where he got his research from. And I give that to more families that have lost a child. And I keep that in my study because it's so important that they're able to read that. The point I'm making is that when I met with this family, you know, I love St. John Paul II. I think he is amazing. I think he's wonderful. I love Padre Pio. I went to his shrine in Italy, and I prayed at his tomb. My favorite is the Little Flower, St. Therese of the Little Flower. I love her dearly. When I was a young priest, we had a high school student who had cancer. And again, there were no cell phones. And the internet was just pretty much starting. And the doctor, Zuckerman in intensive care, as I was leaving to go to the airport, it was World Youth Day in Paris. We were going to Italy and then over because she was being made the doctor of the church. Just love that woman. She's awesome. So as I was leaving, the doctor said to me, give us a phone number of where you're going to be staying because if he dies, do you want to know? And I go, he can't die because I won't be here. It's not about you, Father. You got to give us the number. So I gave him the number with all the things. So there's always a nun who gives out the little prayer cards for St. Teresa. You know, we got to pray for, pray her little miracle thing. So she's giving out cards to everyone in all different languages. Well, 2 a.m, I get a phone call saying that Sean wasn't going to make it. And there were about 4 of us, 4 adults in one room. So they hear me crying. We're all up, we're praying. I got everyone praying, we're praying, we're praying. One of the girls snuck away from the group. She went to McDonald's. She comes back. Sister goes, wait till Father sees you, because, he's stressed out enough about Sean, and now you walk away and everything. Oh, get over it, sister. And then she goes, you need this more than me. She handed me a rose. Now, does anyone know the miracle of the little flower? So right away, I called up the next day. He's going to make it. So I fly back. I go to see him. His parish priest comes, a newly ordained, all dressed up. He was so proud to be there. The first thing he says to Sean is, Sean, you were so close to death. Do you need to go to confession? Well, Sean looked at me, and I looked at the priest, and I looked at Sean, and I go, Sean, and he could hardly talk, and I go, do you want me to tell him what you really need? And he says, I go, he really needs a good bowel movement, because he was on so much pain medicine that he can't go. And he just asked for the bedpan. So if you want to stay here while he goes, I'm going to leave, because let me tell you, we need to have those conversations of workshops. Where I'm leading up with this, and I'm going into detail for this reason. He left high school, graduated high school, went to college. His cancer came back with vengeance. I went to Children's in Philly. I was with him when God called him home. As a young priest, I was very upset. I really thought the little flower let me down. Only as a mother could do it. The morning that he died, the mother looked at me and said, Father, before he had that near-death experience, he was a selfish individual. He fought with us. He was so angry. He didn't even want you to come around, but you were so damn pushy that you just walked in the room. It was after that experience, he became the son we remembered before the cancer. It was as almost God prepared him to go home. I share that with you because when I went to speak to this parents about this child that died, they brought this child to a priest in my diocese who has the cicada, the relic of JP2, has everything of JP2. When the child died, they did that in the summertime. The child died 3 weeks ago. The questions that came to me was, why did God allow this to happen? Because she touched the relic of John Paul II. Why did this happen? Because we have pictures of the cicada. Why did this happen? Because when she was being prayed over with the relic, the lights flickered in the room. Why did this happen? The glove of Padre Pio has come through my intensive care unit when I worked in the hospital so many times. And it's the children I'm concerned about, the older siblings, because they're like, why did this happen? We had this glove that had his blood on it. We have to stick to the scriptures. We have to be able to prepare our people that death is not the end, but a new beginning. It's the resurrection. And how important that is. Whenever they would call me in and the doctors couldn't do anything anymore, they used to say, get Father because he knows what to do. And to this day, I always carry my rosary beads with me. The one doctor turned around and said, Father, what are those worry beads you have in your hand? I go, there's something more than worry beads. Because that question that came up to Father Doctor about people saying the most stupidest thing, so many times when I'm with a family at the moment of death, they don't need me to talk. But I'll pull out my rosaries and I'll quietly say that to myself. It's the presence that is needed. Whenever someone is even when I went to visit the school children, the teacher goes, well, I told them that everyone needed this little girl, they needed, I'll call her Jessica. They needed Jessica because God had a special thing for her in heaven. And I don't correct them because I want to say, that was the stupidest thing you say. I always look at them and say, I would rather say that cancer caused the illness, but God never abandoned her. And what I tell parents is that she came from goodness. She returned to goodness. She never had to deal with the horror of life because her parents protected her from that. As adults, we need to be able to bring that message to our loved ones. The assisted suicide that took place in Oregon, it devastated me Devastated me. And on the news, the young girl in her video said, I hope my family would forgive me. I hope my family would forgive me. 25 years of being with people who are dying. Never did I hear once, I hope my family would forgive me that I'm dying. I did hear many times in the hospital, Father, what can we do to speed this up? It kills me to watch Mama this way. It kills me to watch my child this way. And then at the moment of death, they look up at me and they say, I need to go to confession. Why? Because I thought this. I go, no, you thought it, you didn't act on it. Every parent that I've been with who's lost a child, and we have a relationship, and they share that most intimate time of when a child passes, they never pass alone. They always pass in the arms of a parent or the arms of both parents. Never once did they say, I wish I had a cocktail that I could give my child so she can go. Instead, they say, I felt her relief as she left. And I felt that she really is not in pain anymore. There's no that guessing. Could I have done something or couldn't I have done something? When my own father, I'm not used to speaking with my brother in the room. When our father passed away, was very sick at one time, our other two brothers used to say, where are you? Don't you tell Mike I'm telling stories. Used to say, don't leave Anthony alone with Daddy because he always talks about death. And I go, well, I mean, it's phenomenal. My father used to say, you know, Anthony, at the age of 78, the men in the Siriannis, we die. I go, no, Dad, that's not true. Then about 2 months later, I go, Dad, remember about being 78? He goes, yeah. I go, yeah, I think it is true. He goes, yeah, you think so? And I go, yeah. And we started talking about death. We started preparing for death. And when God called him, and my mother couldn't make the decisions, where's the deacon? My mother couldn't make the decisions anymore, so I stepped up to make the medical decisions, and I still make medical decisions for my mother. You know, as God called him, he went in such peace. And we were at the wake, and we had a dear cousin, God rest his soul. I think by now he's in heaven. He was just not a happy person. And he lived to be in his 90s, and he was a Sirianni. How the hell that happened? But he came up to me and he goes, Anthony, I don't understand. If he went in the hospital and he passed away so quickly, why wasn't he on a respirator? Why wasn't he on this? And I looked at him, I go, Joe, don't go down that road. And you better not let my brothers hear you because they'll tear you to shreds. And I said, just keep walking. Because I had that conversation with him. He didn't want the respirator. He didn't want to have someone pressing on him, doing all those compressions. He didn't want all of that. There are people who are seniors, who if it's for the short term, like Father covered so beautifully, that's important. I had a woman call me up, I was telling over at this table, she says to me, Father, you got to go talk to Alfred, my father. He's 100 years old. He's going for dialysis. I go, what the hell is he going for dialysis for? So I go to the rehab center, nursing home where he's at. I go, Alfred, I heard you went for dialysis. Oh, Father, let me tell you, beautiful women, just beautiful women. That is the best 48 hours I have a day. Whatever you do, don't take that away from me. Now, Alfred, before he fell and had an accident when he was 99, he would exercise, walk. He was in better health and shape than I'll ever be in. When he died at the age of 100, almost 101, as a parish, we were in shock. We don't look at age. We look at the person. And we love that person for that age. And that's what's so important. And what we're seeing now, because of smoking and substance abuse and all of that, we're seeing our seniors taking care of their children. Or seniors taking care of our younger seniors. And that is something that is so devastating. It's so important because when you look at people, I'm not even using my notes, when we look at people who have faith, like one of the doctors said to me one time, Father, how do you do what you do? And I go, if I walk in the room knowing they have a belief in God, then we have somewhere to go. It's when they don't have a belief in God that I have a really hard time, because I have to be able to bring some sort of faith into their life in order for them to realize that death is not the end. I'm probably the first priest that fired a second grade volunteer CCD teacher when I was living out in Port Murray. She told the second graders that when the dog and cat dies, they're dead, they have no soul, they're in the grave, that's it. They have no use in the world. So I fired her. Do you know, to this day, I have more seniors bringing me their cremains of their pets? Now, of course, a liturgist would say, really, Anthony? But I say, there's St. Francis. Someone has to be welcoming these beautiful pets to heaven. You know, we have to be able to take the people from where they are and be able to educate them. And for some people, those pets are the only ones in their life because everyone is so busy and so far away. That is something else that is just so important. I feel like I'm in Rome now. Only my brother would have bells like this. Don't the neighbors complain? The one thing that is so important is that when we make our decisions, the advance directive, you don't need to do like my late father or my mother did. They had an attorney write this thing that is so in such detail. You really need something that's very simple form, something that is very, like Father passed out. The main thing is you need two people who can speak for you and be able to have that conversation. And it's important to have that conversation. Because without that conversation, then things happen that really are not very pleasant. And it is true that one question that was brought to me with hospice, that people are in hospice in nursing facilities less time than it used to be. The problem is today, we can't afford to put people in nursing facilities until we're almost to the end. Pulmonologist doctors, I have one in my parish, she's furious because she refuses to sign off because she would feel if she could only have a couple more days to work with a patient to be able to clear up the pneumonia and naturally take the patient off. A lot of hospitals today, what do they want? Remove everything. Okay, I'm very much that when it's end of life, you remove everything, and the one thing they need mostly is their family or someone to be there with them. But we really need to be updated on our medical care. We need to be updated on who's going to speak for us, who has a clear head and understands medical terms, and who's going to make sure that we're not in pain when we are in pain. And when we do get that gift, and I really look at it as a gift because I think it comes with aging, but that gift of dementia, that we have someone who can be able to be there to treat us with the highest respect of life. And that is what is so important. Because I think that once someone gets dementia, everyone wants to call it Alzheimer's right away. I still am old-fashioned. I call it dementia because to really diagnose Alzheimer's, it's very difficult. And but whether it's Alzheimer's or dementia, we need to treat them with the greatest gift of life and the respect that's so important, because that is what is also important. I know I'm like all over in my talk because I'm used to talking about children, so this is something new for me to come and talk about adults. But the thing is that, like I opened up and said, we are all children of God, and how important that is. What I'd like to do, if it's okay, is open up to questions, if anyone had questions that they would have. Yes?
I have a question which is sort of an overlap from the previous order, and also here is when we talk about spirituality and fear of death or spirituality for the dying, how does one assist or create that spirituality? What is the tool?
What I always do, and that's a good question, what I always approach is, I'm a dreamer. I always ask about what your dreams are. Are you able to dream? And a lot of times they'll turn around and say, well, no, with the medicine, I'm not able to dream. All right, when you are like, when you listen to them and they say, I'm kind of like zoning out. All right, what are you zoning out about? And then I try to pick up on that. A lot of times they're zoning about a parent that died, or being able to zone out about something like that. And to bring that spirituality in that what is it going to be like when God calls you home? What do you think heaven's going to be like? And to be able to kind of bring that. Or why did God give me this horrific illness? And that's a whole thing of the spirituality of God does not create bad, God does not create pain, but God's here to journey with us. And Rabbi Christian did a beautiful job about Adam and Eve and good and evil. And even though we are so good to our children, to each other, to those we love, we create this horrific illness. And say the illness and say that's what we're angry, that's what you're feeling is real, but can you look at it more of what you're angry at is the illness. And if you are angry at God, God has broad shoulders and he can handle it. But just don't turn away from God, and don't turn away from God's love. And that's that, it's where you take them from. The traditionals are the traditional prayers. So a lot of times you could talk about the lives of the saints. You could talk about, how we were, whenever I walk into a senior citizen who passed away and the family's there, and if I ever get there right before they die, I always look at them and I say, he did his 9 First Fridays and 9 First Saturdays. What are the 9 First Fridays and 9 First Saturdays? Does anyone know? That when you go to die, a priest is going to be there. So I said, Mama did that. And God was able to give, especially today, it's so hard to get a priest. I tried calling a priest. I drove a parishioner to her daughter who died on hospice. And the son-in-law was mad at the priest. And I said, no, we're going to get her pastor here. Do you know it took me 5 phone calls to get the pastor? Because Monday is the secretary's day off, so no one answers the phone at the parish on Monday. Don't die on Monday up there, honey. Die on Tuesday. But, we all need our days off, so I'm not saying it. But it took 5 phone calls, and it took a secret phone call to the wedding coordinator, because the daughter was getting married, to call the wedding coordinator, who said, well, can I help you? What do you need to talk to Father about? She goes, it's something really personal. And then she was able to call his cell phone, who allowed him to call her cell phone, and they were able to talk. It took an hour to get the priest to the house. And it was good that he did, because he had a close relationship with them. But it is something difficult. Does that answer your question? Could you give me an example?
What I'm concerned, that's the whole idea of spirituality is very difficult. It's very easy to minister to same tradition. I'm a Roman Catholic, and so if I minister to a Roman Catholic, we sort of know the same buzzwords and the same stories, let's say. But what about when you minister to someone who's not?
Like when you're ministering to a Hindu, or you're ministering to a Sikh, or if you're ministering to any other religion, we all have that belief in there's a God. And then you take their tradition with that. In Judaism, I used to have the prayers of the sick and the prayers of the dead written phonetically. Because at that time, in the children's hospital was a woman rabbi, and the Orthodox would not accept a woman rabbi. So they would call the priest in to do the prayers of the dead or the prayers of the dying. And I had that phonetically written out. But mainly, spirituality in a situation of someone who's dying of another faith is really listening to where they're at. And all spirituality has that connection of wanting the fear of the unknown and entering into that wonderful life. And that's what is so important.
So
it's the presence, yeah. You can't read up on it. You got to bring your faith, not your traditions, but your faith. The young people today will be the first to say, Father, I'm not connected to an organized religion, but I'm very spiritual. and I can have a very spiritual conversation with them, and I'm still working on how do I connect them back to the traditional church. That's what we're facing with. Was there a question back there? Yes.
Father, my husband is disabled and has been since 2005. He spent 4.5 months at Robert Wood Johnson that year. And came to the point of death a couple of times, and God brought him back. I find that what I'm advocating most for him with physicians is the fact that he's not afraid of death. And that many times I've had to talk to physicians, his physicians, the specialists, about the fact that it's not that he wishes for death, but he doesn't fear it. And to him, like in 2009, he had a pacemaker defibrillator planted. The cardiologist told him, when this is done, you can go home, because he now does not like hospitals. At the end of that, when he came out from the procedure, we both learned he couldn't go home, because he's a bilateral above-the-knee amputee. He can't move himself except on his hands, and he can't use that left arm for 2 weeks while the electrodes implant. So
Right.
he had to go to a rehab hospital for 2 weeks. He broke down in tears, was crying terribly, saying, if I had known this, I would never have agreed to the procedure. They immediately wanted to call for a psychologist to come in and evaluate him, and weren't going to release him to the rehab hospital, because he must be depressed or insane, since he said he would not have agreed to the procedure. I literally had to sit down with the hospital administrator and the nursing supervisor and explain to him, he is as mentally sound as I am. He's a man of faith. We like him. And he would rather have dealt with the heart condition he has than to give up his liberty, his dignity, and have to be cared for like that for 2 weeks in rehab. He got beyond
Yeah, yeah.
but I find myself now being forthright for him and helping the physicians to understand that he's comfortable with this stage in his life. And we have advanced directives that he filled out, which might help. But it's clear to our family, me too, that he does not want to be messed with.
And so you're his spokesperson.
I am.
So you got to be the pit bull.
I do.
Exactly. When I was the spokesperson for my father at the hospital and the rehab, they would see the collar first, and I know someone was nudging that person saying, look behind the collar because he's a pit bull. He is not the nicest person. Because I know what it should be. I know how it should be. And that's how we have to do that. But the thing is that it's so important that you, as the spokesperson, say, you know what? You're absolutely right. This is a real feeling. But we're here now. So let's make this work. And maybe that's what they were, I don't know what they were trying to do, but maybe that's what they're trying to do. You know, when I was at Robert Wood, I used to work with a lot of the Protestant chaplains. And, you know, because of my personality, you know, everyone wanted the priest and not the chaplain. So there was a little tension there, but I just ignored it. You know what I'm saying? I'm a priest. But what happened was that there was a situation in the Children's Hospital. And one thing Father said, which is so true, we have St. Peter's and Robert Wood that's close together. The same doctors go back and forth. If they can't do a procedure or remove any type of therapy, they bring them over to Robert Wood. And the Children's Hospital was just being built at the time. So the nurses were really upset. I'll never forget the boy's name. His name was Evan. He was severely brain damaged. Came close to death so many times. But the parents wanted everything possible for him. So now he's at a point where he can go home and have all the special needs. And all of a sudden, we get a transfer from St. Peter's because the parents decided they want everything removed. The feeding tube removed. They didn't even want him being fed with a bottle. And the chaplain student who was on for the floor, since it wasn't Catholic, I wasn't called in, ended up calling DIFUS. So there was this big thing. They brought an ethicist in. We all had to meet. And the VP of the Children's Hospital called me in their office with the director of pastoral care and said, Father, we will pay you, but you got to help us in this situation. And I said, well, I don't take any money, but I will do it. So what I decided with the ethicist is that we would take care of this child. We made sure there was bottle feeding. He did have some motion. And that each of us, as long as this child was awake, would never be left unheld. And for the 3 shifts in those days, you had 3 shifts, now they do 12-hour shifts. The 3 shifts that the nurses would go on, I was up there and I had my turn in holding a bottle and holding Evan. It was the worst feeling to hold a child that you know is starving. It is something that I'll never forget in my life, not only as a priest, but as a human being. And the other thing was that the parents detached themselves. So the father would come every night, and that was one of their concerns, that when the father came, he would just watch football or watch what was on TV and totally ignore him. So I decided with the parents, we would call the parents in, that every time the father is there, he was the only one that came, the mother never came, I would sit in the room with them. And if the child needed something, I would get the nurse to come in and do that. I knew it wasn't going to be a long term. And when the child died, the father came, he saw him, he says, okay, God forgive me. He goes, God gave me such patience. He goes, okay, wrap him up. Well, and I go, well, we'll take care of him from here. And I had a list of staff and doctors to call. And we had our own wake for Evan. I did the prayers, and we had our own little service room because we needed the closure. And then they were able to put in place very strict rules in those days that no, we will not take someone just because you decide that you want to detach yourself from your child. That's what scares me about, and I refuse to call it what everyone else calls it. I'll call it by its formal name. That's what scares me about affordable health care, because we're seeing more and more of this. Do you know that there's a young man, 28 now, totally, he has AIDS, but AIDS you live with. You take your medicine. But because he lost both his parents, he's living in one of the Catholic charity apartments. He is totally depressed, will not eat. The only thing he'll drink is vanilla and Sure. Medicare, Medicaid used to cover vanilla and Sure. Do you know with affordable health care in the state of New Jersey, it does not cover that? So the hospital called me and said, Father, what can you do? So we have a thing quarterly where I'll just turn around and I'll say, Brandon needs Ensure. My parishioners bring cases of it. And I bring it to the hospital and they bring it over to him and he has his Ensure. This is the thing. We have to look at every person, child, adult, senior, individually and say, what are their needs? How can we meet their needs? To be a spiritual healer in an healthcare environment today, we have to wear all hats. And we have to cover all areas. And we have to work with the social worker, the doctors, the nurses. We have to work as a team. And that is what is so important. To be a team player is so important in order to give the best care to all people of all ages. Any questions or? I think I'm ending early, but is that all right? I mean, I don't know. No one fell asleep, and they didn't throw anything at me. Yes. Yes.
Father, this is going back to when they were talking about hospice also. I think my dad passed away a year ago, September, and I'd like to say it was kind of on his terms. He had a lot of medical conditions. He had spent a lot of time in the hospital, rehab, and as this woman behind him said, she had to really be the advocate for her husband because my dad wasn't afraid to die.
You know, the thing is whether it's a Catholic or a religious affiliation hospice, they pretty much follow the same guidelines, and what they're pulling back on is medicines that are going to make him uncomfortable, and the medicines that he needs to give him that comfort. So one thing that I hear what you're saying, which myself and so many caregivers hear, is, did I have anything to do with ending it early? You didn't. And the medicines that they do give, you know, that they do take away, because a lot of times, like my dad was on insulin. Well, he lost so much weight, he didn't need the insulin anymore. You know, he was on another pill, he didn't need that anymore. So, I mean, so really, you really can't, by them picking and choosing what medications your loved one is having, they know what they're doing. That's universal. If I'm right, doctor? I mean, it's very rare that it's when they make those cocktails up and give medicine that he's not used to. Am I right by saying this? Then that would be something that would be concerned. I had a beautiful parishioner. She kept getting thinner and thinner. She went to hospitals, and this just happened 2 months ago. Never had children. Her husband passed. She went to hospitals in New York, Philadelphia, everywhere. They could not understand why she was losing so much weight. She had to be almost 6 foot, very tall, very stately woman. I just loved her. And I come walking in from school to my office, and my secretary, she wears her emotions on her sleeve. She's crying. So I go, what's the matter? So she goes, you know, Mrs. So-and-so, she's on hospice. I just spoke to her. She just came in. She booked the missus for her husband. Oh. So I says, okay, Carrie, pull it together. I go, I know. He goes, what do you mean you know? I said, well, I knew she was been sick, and we don't know what's wrong with her. So I wanted to go over. We couldn't get over. And she, you know what, I said to the nephew when he came to the house, I go, I feel bad because I didn't get to see her. But at the same time, she always looked superb when she came to church. You know what I mean? And I really think she didn't want anyone to see her. So, which is fine, and that happens. The nephew said the doctors were shocked. She called hospice herself and she said, this is Mrs. So-and-so. I am dying. I know I'm dying. No one wants to let me die, but I'm going to put myself on hospice. And my doctor is Dr. So-and-so, so please call him, have him release me to be on hospice. And can you get someone here today? Because I live alone. Then she called her nephews, and she says, can you get here because I'm going to die? The nephews got there. He wasn't even there 48 hours. They just hired the live-in. They were just getting everything set for her. He went back to Long Island because that's where they're originally from. And next thing you know, he gets a phone call. She passes. I said, what a gift to be that strong in saying, you know, and she would say to me, oh, these doctors, they keep trying everything. But I know, Father, the last time I saw her in church, she would always light that candle right by the Holy Family statue. And she'd say, I know I'm dying. And she says, and don't be surprised, but I'm going to tell them. I go, okay, you tell them. And she did. So you know what I'm saying? Not everyone has, I don't think I would even have that inner strength. My dad turned around and said, Anthony, when I die, make sure you're here. I said, only God can do that. The grace of God, I was there when my father died. And I was the only one that was there with him. Because I would never leave him. And when he did pass, I held him and I said, let go, I have you. And he actually stopped breathing. The resident brought me a cup of coffee. When you have a collar on, let me tell you, they do really nice things. But he brought me a cup of coffee, and as he brought me a cup of coffee, I heard the coffee drop. The resident dropped the coffee and left the room. He was just so, he said, and he came up to me afterwards and apologized. He goes, I've never seen a person have that much trust in another person. And I go, don't everyone have that relationship with their dad? You know, and then because I worked in the hospital, the nurse was surprised because I turned everything off. He had oxygen. Turned the oxygen off. I took the mask. I prepared them. I used to do this. I mean, no one was going to do it for my dad but me. You know, but it's something I always remember is that I was able to help him. Now, did I, days afterwards, question myself and say, should I have done this? Crazy cousin Joe, should I have followed his rules and did all this extra thing? And then I went and talked to somebody. And the person looked at me and goes, those are real feelings, Anthony, but you did the right thing. The main thing is, spirituality, is instead of saying don't have those feelings, those are real feelings. Let's work with them. Let's see where they're going to lead us to. I know I only have 5 minutes, but like the little girl, she lives here in Jackson. There's actually 9 in the family, and she was 7.5 with cancer. She had little eyes that looked like chipmunk from the chemo. She had a very, very rare cancer, and there was does anyone remember a priest from the old Yugoslavia? He had the stigmatas. He was coming around well, she met him, and the priest prayed over him and looked at the mother and said to the mother, your child is going to be in heaven, but will die without pain. This child never had medication for pain. And the doctors were beside themselves because of the advanced cancer. So her last meeting at the Cancer Institute, we were all sitting there, and she turned around, and the doctor said to her, Elisa, there's nothing we can do. And she goes, can I go home for good now? And the doctor said, yeah, and the doctor started crying. She got up, she kissed everyone goodbye, and she came up to me, and she grabbed my hand, and she said, would you come to my house today? You know, it was like I was her little friend. I go, yeah, let me go back to my church. I'll come to your house. I stayed with her till about 4 a.m, and then I went, and actually my brother invited me, Msgr Gervasio. I went to his parish for St. Anthony, at St. Anthony's Parish there, before they combined it and made it some crazy name. Anyway, so I went over to that parish, and I preached for St. Anthony, and then I got a call. By that time, I had a cell phone. I got a call on my cell phone, and she passed away on the feast of St. Anthony of Padua. She was born on the feast of St. Blaise. I said, with 2 beautiful, strong saints. You know, she had the innocence to hear the doctors to say it's time to go home. She had that innocence. She had that faith. It was because of the family. It's because of the parish family that supported them. She made first communion in 1st grade because she was in 2nd when she died. When I gave her first communion in her little white dress, I knew it was the dress she was going to be buried in. You know, my brother would touch on this, but it's so true. When we're baptized into Jesus Christ, we're starting to live that life, going towards the kingdom. We don't know why God calls us home at what age, but Lord, give me the strength to have the innocence and the purity of a child, so when I know that my body cannot go anymore, I can be able to say to the Lord, it's time for me to go home. And know that there will be people there to surround me with love and with the right medical care and the right spiritual care so I can be able to meet my Heavenly Father. Thank you.